Hello, everyone. So I'm Thibaut, currently a consultant developer at ThoughtWorks. I'm originally from Cameroon, Central Africa. So I'm sure some of you have heard of Eto'o, the soccer player. So he's a Cameroonian, and he's talking about getting people to talk about us in Europe and in the soccer arena. Today I'm going to walk you through a possible strategy to increase the reach and impact of your application using SMS and USSDs. So, does anyone want to tell us what an SMS is? Yes. So, short text message is a way for you to, so you send some text to another phone. So, you actually send the text to another phone and you can get an answer back. Does anyone want to tell us what USSD is? Has anyone used his phone to check what the current airtime is on the phone? So something like, let's do something. Where is my application? Exactly. So that's what USSDs is all about. So it's basically every time you check your airtime on your phone, that's what you are using. So I'm sure everyone has done this at a certain point in time. So the screen currently is too big for me to show a demo, but it's just a typical thing you do on your cell phone. So you go. Yes, I do some fitness from time to time. When I'm not working, because it's important to stay fit. So there's still a lot of things to do on that side. So if you go on MTN, you do *141 *1#. You call, and you get a menu. So currently the focus has changed, but I'm sure everyone gets what's happening in the background. And you answer. So if I answer with 1, it gives me the airtime on my phone, which is not likely to be much. So something like 33 rand. Cool. And I could have picked something else. And what the main difference between this and an SMS is, the interaction between me and the application on the other side is live. So when I send you an SMS, you can read it in 1 hour time, you can read it in the daytime. There's no way for me to control when I get and hear back from you. USSD is totally different because there's actually a connection between the two machines that are currently interacting. So I send a message, I get a response immediately. So there's no lag, and there's more control, and it's more live, real time. So those two features, so USSDs and SMS, are features that you can easily add to your phone or to your application. So when you develop your application, normally it will work straight up on desktop, it works on laptop, so there's nothing to do. And at least you build it for it to work there. And if your application is a web application, you are likely to get the application to work straight on smartphones also. And currently, when we look at statistics, so we look at usages of desktop versus usages of mobile phone, we see that the trend is currently changing. So in the past, 2007, most people were on the desktops, few people on the mobile phone or a cell phone. The trend is changing, and currently we are somewhere around here where the usage is about 50-50, but it's likely to change in the future. And you need to go follow the flow and take advantage of that. Now is the time for you to get your application to take advantage of that and get more people to know about your application. So as a developer, it might be an opportunity for you to get people to see how good a developer you are, how cool your application is. As a business owner, it means that more people know about your application. And knowing about your application, there are different levels of knowing about your application. It might be just people knowing that your application exists, knowing that they can interact with it, might mean that later on they can go and use your application in the normal way. So getting more people to actually interact with your application. So now, how will people interact with your application? If they have a smartphone, interacting with your application is just a matter of making sure your application is responsive. So if it's a web application, when it's on a smartphone and the scale changes, it changes accordingly, and you get things to work properly. So that's a whole set of things to do. So developers, nowadays, request for application to be responsive is quite high. So for most of the developers, if your boss has not asked you to make the application responsive yet, it's likely to do that sometime soon. And that's something that we all need to get at. The other alternative is trying to target not smartphones, but targeting feature phones. So the difference between smartphone and feature phone is a bit blurred. So there's no strict definition when does a smartphone become when does a feature phone becomes a smartphone. The main differences are in terms of, on the smartphone, for example, the screen will be wide. If you are looking on you are checking a website, you see a lot of things. The pixel resolution is good. A feature phone might give you access to internet, but it won't look nice. You won't want to come there every day. And you won't want to show that to your girlfriend to see, that's my phone. No, you don't want to go there. So, and there's also a price component in terms of targeting clients. So you might want smartphones. It means that you'll be targeting people that are generally in the high end of the customer base. They have a lot of money, they can afford the smartphone. But most of the population is not in that space. And if you want to get more people using your application, you shouldn't be targeting only those. You should target everyone. So you should target feature phones for your application as well as smartphones. And if we look at the trends and at the statistics, we'll see that in terms of sales worldwide, there has been a change, and in the recent past, smartphones have sold feature phone. So that happened in Western Europe in the second quarter of 2010, where smartphone had sold feature phone, and that happened in North America in 2011. Even in Africa, nowadays, if you want to buy a phone, you generally go for an iPhone, especially with credit. So that change, and that's change in what people are looking for is happening all over. So if you see in this graph, we see smartphone sales is growing up exponentially, but feature phone sales is still there. And overall, even in 3 years' time, feature phone sales represent just under 40% of sales. So you should still go for those. And remember that even on smartphones, if you get your application to interact and be able to be used through SMS and USSDs, smartphone will be able to use it, feature phone will be able to use it. So you have a larger customer base. So when we look at developed countries versus developing countries, we see that smartphones sales represent roughly 50% of sales in developed country against 20% of sales in developing country. So yes, we are buying smartphones, but we are not buying them as much as somewhere else in America and in Europe. And in terms of connection, as a whole, so in terms of cell phones, the penetration and the number of connections in Africa is constantly increasing. So interacting through cell phones is definitely something to look at. because the customer base there is likely to increase. And getting your app to tap in that space early on is something that you can profit from. So meaning that you get actually the opportunity to learn, and by the time everyone will be coming to the party, you would have had the experience already. Because everything in development, it takes a time and it takes a while to get comfortable and know what's good, what's bad in that space. So let's now focus on Africa, so not worldwide. So if we look only at Africa, most of the 4G phones represent the smartphones. And in Africa, sales of most of the phones are feature phones or basic phones. Basic phones typically will be phones that just do simple call and SMS. There's no internet access. It doesn't handle MMS, nothing too fancy, so just the basics. And in terms of sales, so the trend is likely to stay on for a while. And one of the advantages of using USSD and SMS is everyone will be able to use it. Even in remote areas, you get people, a hunter, you might not know about the car, but you will have access to your application, which is always something good to be in this position in that position. And overall, so far we have been talking mostly about sales. So if we look now at actual usages of phone, yes, the usages of smartphones is going up, but in terms overall, in terms of the market share in cell phone space, there's still feature phone. Those are the ones that dominant, and those are the ones you should be targeting first. Because if you can reach there, then that's a great thing, and you'll be gaining a lot from it. And when talking about smartphones, nowadays, you might have a smartphone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are using all the features on the smartphone. Like my dad, I've given him smartphones, I've given him feature phones. He keeps using the feature phones. He doesn't like the smartphone. He doesn't like touching the touchscreen, no. And he's the one, his generation are the one that currently have the money. So those are the ones you want to target. So how do you get or add that feature, so the SMS and UUSD capability to your phone? So currently in the Python world, there's quite a few options. And what we have used so far, we have used Vumi, and we have used Rapid SMS. So currently, Prequel is the Vumi creator. They are one of the organizers of this. So I'm sure most people know about Vumi, how to use it. And there's likely to be a lot of experts in the room. So I'll give you, we'll have a look briefly on both of them. Cool. So let's go with Vumi first. So Vumi has been used in real life on many projects so far. We at ThoughtWork, we used it on one of our projects, mPedigree, which is the one I'll be talking about mostly. mPedigree is a software that helps fight counterfeit drugs. So the principle is, when you buy a drug from a pharmacy, how do you know it's the real deal? So here in South Africa, not everyone might relate to that, because getting counterfeit drugs at the pharmacy is quite rare. So generally when you buy it, there's no question asked. But when you go to a region like Cameroon, where I'm originally from, and Nigeria, where more than 50% of the drug you buy from the pharmacy are fake, that's a real issue. So you might be taking something that's meant to make you feel better, and it's still, not only is it not neutral, so not doing you, not harming you, but it might be actually negative to you. So it's not helping you, but instead it's making you more sick. mPedigree is a way to help prevent that. And the principle is simple. From production, so from the warehouses where the drug gets produced, there's a sticker with a number that gets that's put on the drug. And all the way up until it gets to the patient, there's a way for you to track and make sure, is this the real deal? Is the provenance real? Is it coming straight from the manufacturer? And what a system does is it allows everyone in the chain, so the producers, the people selling, the wholesaler of drugs, the pharmacist, and even the end user to be able to check and make sure, is this the real drug? Yes?
Like, wouldn't that just create like opportunities for people to be more creative, because that's just a tracking number, so they can just use the bottles to store these counterfeit drugs that they're trying to push?
Yes, you can do that. It's just like between the cup and the rubber. When the cup improves, the rubber improves. There's always a way around it, but you go step by step. So, yeah, I'm sure, and people are quite inventive. So I could have told you that you might lock it hermetically so that once it's open, you can't close it. But after at home, and even I've dealt with some Nigerian, I'm sure they'll find a way to make it look real. So this doesn't solve all the issues, no, but it's a step in the right direction. So if we can sort that out, then it means that making sure that the hardware, so the actual drug and the packaging, prevents people from being able to swap is another fight. But as a software developer that's not a fight, we can mention it we mention it, and it's up to the client to take it over with the manufacturer. So it's at another level that needs to be dealt with. And remember, if we make sure that the fake drugs being actually consumed reduces down by 10%, that's already my mean million of lives saved, which is already great. It's not a perfect solution, definitely. So we have been using it on mPedigree for the past 1 year and plus months. And what we did is we actually built our own standalone server. So Prequel does offer a service where you go and subscribe, and they already have contracts with the different telcos, and they can do, so it makes your life easy. You just make sure your application is in the background. You don't need to do any configuration. But we went the way of having our own server and doing everything on our own. And so the typical architecture of Vumi, so I'm sure most people here will know. If you don't know, it's basically you have a transport worker and you have a application worker. Transport worker is generally you're taking care of the conversation, the dialogue between the external world. In this case, it's telecommunication companies or end users that are using SMS to communicate with your application. And the application worker is the one that will actually do the processing. Because you just bought a drug from the pharmacy, you scratch, you get a PIN, you enter it on your cell phone, and you forward it to a given number. So a number that is provided. So we currently do that in Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. So you forward in each country, depending on the network, you get a code you can send a message to. And the application responds to you telling you, is this a valid medicine that we are currently using or that you are going to use or not? So that's what we have currently implemented, and it has been in use for quite a while now. And Vumi, the tech stacks of Vumi, I won't bore you with that. So let's keep to connectivity. That's where Prequel offers the services. So there's 10 countries where Prequel currently offers. So they already have contracts or understanding with the different networks there, where if you want to use their service option, you can go there straight. Since we went the way of creating our own servers, the main pain point was actually getting that communication between the different telecommunication company and application to work. And from the get-go, the Prequel guys were quite useful, so they were always happy to help. And getting up and running on the platform. They took the time to show us how it worked, what needs to change. And our main pain point was getting actually the application to talk with the different telecommunication companies. Because you go to, in this case, let's say you go to MTN. How you configure your application to talk with an MTN user is not similar to how you configure it to talk with a Vodacom user. They are totally different parameters. So you might go here, what you need the IP address and you need the gateway information. With MTN, it might be 2, 3 entries that you need to provide. With Vodacom, it's 10. And we haven't got a case where the body of the SMS was sitting was totally different from the others. So we spent weeks actually having to take the input, look at all the different entries, and look what looked like the actual message, which is something you don't want to go through. And it was really painful with a lot of administration on the telco company side. So if you go on, so Vumi has a great tutorial online on how to set everything up. So I won't be going through an example here. So if you go Vumi, there's tutorial part 1, part 2, part 3, which is quite straightforward. So you can use a virtual machine and actually go through it and get comfortable with it. But if someone has any specific question, I'm happy to answer them. And if it's more than me, I'm sure there's a practical guy in the room that will be happy to answer it. So let's look at the second option in Python. So both options are in Python. They are both open source, meaning that you can actually get the code, look at it, play around with it, get comfortable. And Rapid SMS gives you the option of only adding the SMS capability to your application. Vumi gives you the option of adding a whole bunch of things. So you can use Gtalk to interact with the application. You can use Twitter. So there's quite a few things. Rapid SMS is smaller in terms of what it does. And even if you look at the code base is not as clean as the one Vumi does. But for what they are doing is a good effort, and is being used in a few projects currently. Rapid SMS is Django based, so it's framework sitting on Django, and it allows you to build. So you can use it as a standalone, so you can build your own server, get everything working. So you don't need to depend on anything for both of this framework, which is one of the things we liked about it, because it actually gives you the freedom where you can sit and you have total control. If you looked, there are some commercial options like Twilio from Google that was released in April this year. That's a subscription only. So you don't have that freedom of being able to do everything on your own. You need to go and subscribe and you pay, and it's quite expensive compared to the other options. So that's why here I'm focusing only on the more open source and the one where you can actually get dirty, sit and look at the code and see how it works. You can improve on it, change things if you don't like it. So Rapid SMS architecture is different from that of Vumi. In Vumi you have workers, application, you get the transporter that takes care of the communication outside. In Rapid SMS you have backends, router, and you have, this is the application. So backend is the communication with the outside world. And in Rapid SMS, what happens is the backend only takes in and sends out HTTP. So if you want to interact with SMS, you need to write something else. So you need, in our case, we use Canal. So you can use that to transform the SMPP messages into HTTP that the Rapid SMS application that you worked with will take in. So that needs to happen outside of the application itself. It's not that complicated, so it's okay. So that's what you use, and it doesn't sit in the application. And the router does the processing. So it does the filtering, the message comes in, and it does everything. And the application part is the one that you get something in, If you want to transform it, if you want to interpret it, you do it there, and you send it back to the user through the router, then backend path still. So since it's based on Django, some people will be more familiar and more comfortable with that. And it has a incremental aspect in terms on the application side, meaning that it's sort of waterfall structure where you can have actually multiple applications sitting there, and the message comes in. If application 1 doesn't take care of that, then you send it through to application 2, application 3, which might come handy in certain cases. And one of the things that some people will find interesting is you can actually use both Rapid SMS and Vumi. So the typical case might be, as a backend, there's a Vumi backend that you can use in Rapid SMS, which will give the capability to your application to use Gtalk, for example, which is inbuilt in Vumi and is not in Rapid SMS. So that's something that you might want to consider. You might have an application that you have already built, so the application part is working perfectly in Rapid SMS, and you want to extend people that can use it easily. So that's when you can consider a Vumi backend, or there are other combinations that you can look at and see. And you can use a Rapid SMS also there. So meaning that you can reuse the application that you have already in Rapid SMS. Cool. So that's me. Are there any questions? Yes?
You showed a lot of graphs about the feature phone versus smartphone.
Yes.
And the number. But do you have any information about spending habits of people with feature phones, especially for online spending?
Online in terms of data.
Well, besides airtime, people with feature phones be willing to buy product with a feature phone?
My guess is, if you look at, there are quite a few applications that are based on feature phone only, like banking on SMS, which is quite popular in Kenya, meaning that the fact that people have feature phone doesn't mean that they are not ready to spend. And there's that ratio about, I might be spending, let's say, 100 Rand. If you can have access to 100 people that are all ready to spend 2 Rand, so from a financial perspective, that's something better for your company. So it might not necessarily be how much does one person spend. It might be how many people do you tap into, or do you use your application.
Yeah, just asking, do you have access to that kind of information, so you can obviously understand if it's worthwhile building your application at that price point. The cost of development.
I've not looked into that, but I'm sure that should not be something against feature phone. My argument is, if that was the case, there's loads of banking that happens only on SMS in regions like Kenya, and SMS it means not smartphone, and they have been quite successful. They have been running for a while. So I can look and tell you exactly what project that is.
Cool. Any more questions?
Yes?
Right.
I've seen some companies roll out USSD in South Africa and using it to roll out some sort of subscription service. Right? I'm not sure if you have access to the information, but if you wanted to run some sort of subscription service using USSD now, how profitable is something like that?
It depends. If you have a subscription service, the question you need to ask yourself is, who will be paying for the interaction? So in a USSD, there are messages going back and forth. And you can decide either as a company to be the one paying for it, or the user can be the one paying for it. So so typically in the terms and condition of your services, when you get people to subscribe, that's where you decide. So if you are the one paying for it, it's likely to cost you something. So you need to make sure you make your money back. But if the user is the one paying for the subscription, even getting information from it, then it becomes a matter of how many people will try to use the service, which is something people usually play on. But you can build a strategy depending on what's your budget, and what's your target market, so people you are going to reach, to make that profitable. Yes?
Yeah, so I've written applications in USSD and SMS as well, and I think one complication we found was that the time it takes to actually go to or achieve what you want to achieve using USSD because of that. You send something back, reply, send something back. I want to find out, is there like a limit? Because one option is just to go to .mobi site, and most phones, future phones can access the .mobi site, which is much faster to choose that. And I want to find out, is there like a limit in which all the interactions are just now too much? That's now much better just to go and go to .mobi site.
So if I'm getting you right, you want to know what, so what's the minimum in terms of time, and also in terms, because time.
When does it become not worth it to use? Was it going to be worth it? I don't think so.
It depends. So let's say if you have an application, you can use the USSD access as a marketing point. So let's say you can use USSDs to get people to know about your application. And when they want to do the heavy lifting, the things that require a lot of data, and that will require too many back and forth, they have to switch to the website. So if, for example, a typical case is in the healthcare sector. People use USSDs to send reminders to people, give feedback. So today you need to do this, or have you done this? Here's how you should react. And that's as an alternative to the person having to go to the hospital and see someone. So in that case, they are gaining from it, the user and both the hospital, because they don't need to spend that much for the person traveling, and in terms they can manage the time the doctor use better. So can you give me more specific? Because if we have specific cases, then we can discuss, is it reliable or is it not? So checking most of the cases we have seen so far is to check something for USSDs. So you want to check, let's say, your account balance. You want to check, in this case, in the case of M-Pedigree, you want to check what is happening. Is the drug valid? So it's more like a get, and you're not getting a lot of information, meaning that it can be displayed on your screen. If it was a lot of information, then actually scrolling through all the text, that won't be good. So I would suggest, as long as what you want to do or the data you're sending to the user is not too much, go for it. And as long as the back and forth is not too much. So typically, when you use USSDs, you won't see people the back and forth going 10 times. Typically, even if you are checking your credit, then you are checking your internet airtime. Those are two separate things. If there's too much interaction, because I myself as a user, if I have to enter 10 things sequentially, then by the time I enter the 6th, I might have forgotten the 1st. So from a user experience, if you can also build your workflow so that 10 points that 10 input that the user needs to provide you to get what he wants out of the system is reduced in 2-3 steps. That will make it more user-friendly. So it's more a matter of if you are inventive and you take that interaction and the user experience into account, there's room for you to make your application useful. And it's not a matter of moving your whole application there. Taking constraint like how much data is required and all that might mean that you move only part of your application. Because what do you gain from your application? So that's one of the things you need to look at. So moving part of the typical user workflow to USSDs or SMS might mean that because your customer can now check it everywhere he wants, he knows it's important and he will stick with you. And that's investing on the long term for your business. So I'm totally okay. So you are right in saying that not everything can be moved to USSD, definitely. But moving some of it, and it also gives you the opportunity to build that knowledge in-house and start using it now. So that by the time it becomes used everywhere or people are asking for it, you know about it. Yes?
Just a question on that. Also, the costing involved in USSD at times is some services where you actually pay for the USSD to actually between the service provider and others where you don't. So how does that work exactly?
Is usually driven by the contract that exists with the telecommunication companies. There's always a cost, and when signing the contract, so like in our case, we had to go to various countries, talk to various telecommunication companies, and you tell them who is paying, so it's part of the contract. So you can decide that I'm the one paying, so it means that for the user it's free. All the SMSs get charged to my account. And if you say the other way around, that the user is paying, then the user is paying. It gets reduced from their airtime every time they use it. So it's at your own discretion. Any other? Yes?
Yeah, well, I think it's related to what was asking that if we decide to use Vumi and or rapid SMS for our application, does it mean then we sort of have to become WASPs, in that we have to get into a contract with service providers, or using Vumi, that's already taken care of?
Vumi in particular, if you go to Prekel, you can sign a contract with Prekel, who has contracts with some telecommunication companies in some countries. So if you want to use those, then you won't have to go and see all the telecommunication companies. So that's something I'm sure you can talk to a Prekel guy to give you the details. So then it's up to, and the other alternative that we went for is you actually go and see the telecommunication company. So it's up to you to see what's feasible and what's more reasonable. So going the service option, so Prekel and using their Vumi as a service, means that there's some things that they will do for you, they will make your life easier. So
Maybe an increased cost.
yes, so that's something you need to actually sit and look at the numbers, look at your budget, and take it from there. Yes?
Anything else? No?
Just follow up on that. What has your experience been like in terms of interacting with telco operators, in terms of a minimum amount of SMSs that you need to send or a minimum number of USSDs? Have they been very willing on small scale projects, or is there a certain bar that you have to meet in order to meet with them and get these projects going?
So you,
In terms of volume of messages or user base?
that's something you need to discuss in the contract. In our case, when we were testing the application, we had our number cut off because we received a few thousand SMS in an hour. So that wasn't mentioned in the contract. And when they cut it, the number, so they thought it was an error on the system or error on our side. So that's definitely something you might want to mention in the contract to say for this, but because it might also be country dependent. So because as a telco company, the more SMS is happening on their network, the more money comes in for them. So they might be happy for you to only go forward. And if they charge you, for example, that the minimum payment they need from you every month is, let's say, $200. And if $200, if you convert it to SMS, it represents, let's say, 1,000 or 2. Then it's entirely, so if you don't reach that level, they still charge you for that amount. So it's more in the terms of the contracts, but typically they won't aim for a specific bar or a specific minimum, at least from my experience. So it might vary with the different companies and the different countries.
We got time for one more.
Sure.
Not that good, but
One more good one.
Debiting currency off a person's cell phone. I think I've heard in the past that the USSD is being abused like that. And I think I remember a German paper, something on that it has been abused, and in the future it might be, please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's USSD that's been abused for debiting currency off, and locally in Africa, the infrastructure is not there to stop this. Is this something that's have you heard of anything like this?
From my experience, the telecommunication company we talked with, they were giving option of both. So it was more a decision from when signing the contract, who will be billed for it. The tricky thing is, generally, when you see most of the advertisement using SMSs, in the term and condition, they will tell you that every time you send the SMS, you are being billed for it. So as long as, even in the case of UUSDs, as long as they have told you that by a mean, or they give you the opportunity to check it out, it might be legal. Does that make sense?
I just heard of it being abused, that people have been getting debited. I was just wondering, is it the USSD that has been abused to take money off a person's account? I've heard it's been happening. I'm not 100% sure. I'm almost
Yes.
asking you.
Both SMS and USSDs, there's always a charge from the telecommunications company side.
Without the user actually knowing, I'm talking about.
What do you mean by without the user actually knowing?
Can you send USSD, debit something off the user's account without him knowing?
So the way I understand it, so because it seems as if I don't get what you're trying to say. So when
Wondering if it's going to be around for that long. Can you build your infrastructure around it if there is that abuse? I can't remember it, so it's actually a really bad thing. I'm not trying to quote anything. If anybody could remember, no.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, it seems like you guys know something.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the correct answer for you, but it's an abuse of value-added service provided by the network providers. So there are some subscription-based services where you opt in, and people were kind of abusing it. The organizations who were providing the services were the ones who were abusing the service, such that you weren't able to unsubscribe. They were dubious to charge people who hadn't subscribed. So it's not directly related to SMS or USSD.
Yes, it comes down to the term and conditions. So do you know, and can you opt out? Yes.
But like in that line, with this abuse kind of happening, what's the reputational problems with USSD and SMS if this kind of thing is happening for you to invest like a lot of your company's resources into developing these systems? If the reputational factor of USSD is going to that point that is being abused, so that users don't necessarily think it's a good option.
It's more.
We just need to take it. You guys,
Sure.
anyone who's really interested in the USSD abuse and whatever, take it offline and
Sure.
we can pick it up there. Thanks a lot, Sigmar.
Thank you.
Great talk.